and welcome to Loftside Bantr. And on today's show, we have an award-winning play-by-play announcer, as well as an award-winning author, Steven Physioc. Any sports fan is going to love that interview. It was phenomenal to talk to him and really get a good idea of what it's like to be in the booth during some of these moments and to be a play-by-play announcer in the sports field. So phenomenal. I cannot say enough. Phenomenal interview with Steven Physioc. And then after the interview, we're going to talk a little bit about the Champions League final between PSG and Inter Milan. And then we'll go into some sporadic sports stories that happened early this week. A lot to get into, so let's get into the countdown and kick it over to myself.
We are on in 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello and welcome into Loftside Bantr, a loaded show today with our interview with legendary play-by-play broadcaster and award-winning author Steven Physioc. We'll have some exciting news at the end about our Massachusetts Pirates interview coming up this week, and then a look at the UEFA Champions League game between PSG and Inter Milan, with PSG coming out with their first ever Champions League victory. Before we get into that, some breaking news is that the New York Knicks have fired head coach Tom Thibodeau just a week after leading the team to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they lost to the Indiana Pacers. And we'll have a NBA and NHL preview show recording later today, so that'll come out later this week with some predictions and stuff like that with myself and a guest star. Seems like a shocking move for the Knicks to make, whereas a lot of people were responding in that organization to Tom Thibodeau. He had been there for 5 years, and it was the first time they had been to the Eastern Conference Finals in 25 years. So why making the move from Tom Thibodeau when you had one of the most successful seasons that we have seen in a while? Now, we went over it last show where it was everything about, hey, is this a successful season? Is this not a successful season for the Knicks? Where does this rank? And everything else. So it seems very surprising because I considered this a successful season for them. I don't know if the people in New York necessarily did, but I did, because you were able to beat the Celtics, get to that Eastern Conference Finals, put on at least a decent performance against the Pacers, who seem like a team of destiny, though running up against the Thunder, which is a absolute monster of a team. Basically, the report says the Knicks are singularly focused on their pursuit of a championship and believe a new voice will serve as the focus for the organization's next step. I don't necessarily think this is the smartest move by them. I think you had the good building blocks in place with Thibodeau as your head coach. But with that, it just seems like the Knicks feel there's somebody else out there that can get them over the hump out of the Eastern Conference. I think they a little bit overachieved from where I thought they were at the beginning of the year. So this was a difficult move, I'm sure, but I don't think it was necessarily the right move by the Knicks. I think it's a stereotypical kind of move that they make when they show a little bit of promise. So we'll see what happens. And again, the Knicks are going to be able to make some moves in the offseason. And, under a new head coach, does that mean that maybe Karl-Anthony Towns is out of here? A lot of people weren't happy with him after his performance in the Eastern Conference Finals, even though he was one of the guys that kind of kept them in the series when they were down 3-1. But that's just, again, we'll see what happens with this. But this is breaking news right now that Tom Thibodeau was just fired by the New York Knicks. And again, that breaking news will lead us into our interview. Today, my guest is a former play-by-play announcer for nearly 5 decades. He's been broadcast with the Cincinnati Reds, San Francisco Giants, the California Angels or the Anaheim Angels, and the Kansas City Royals. He also dabbled in basketball and football, basketball with the Golden State Warriors, and in football, it was the LA Rams and the Cincinnati Bengals. He worked for ESPN. He worked for Fox. He's had a ton of Hall of Fame color commentators with him, including Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, George Brett, John Smoltz, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Joe Torre, a whole list of them. I am, of course, talking about Steven Physioc, who, since retiring in 2023, has become a award-winning author. He's written 4 books. He's working on his 5th one. The books that he's put out, The Walls of Luca, and then Above the Walls, which is the sequel to it. And then he's also written Walks in the Wind and Catching the Wind, that one more based upon some baseball backdrop as well. You can find all about him and his incredible life in sports and as his writings at stevephysioc.com. That's Steve, PHYSIOC.com, stevephysioc.com. And I'm sure he's sick of me putting all of these nice accolades, though they are all well-deserved. But I am very excited to welcome Steven Physioc to the program and cannot tell you how grateful I am for your time today, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Andrew. Thank you very much for inviting me on your show. And in retirement, I'm writing more and doing more podcasts with individuals like you. But it was a great career, 5 decades in sports. And now my wife and I moved to Colorado in the Rocky Mountains to not only hike and ski, but also write more.
Beautiful. So I'll kind of start on your broadcasting journey, and then we'll get into your writing and everything else like that, because it's 2 aspects of my life that I had always dreamed of kind of doing. So, as a kid, I would play Madden or whatever, and I would announce the games and the play-by-play and stuff like that. And then, I love to write different things down. I actually have a whole bunch of stuff written, but I just thought it was really cool that you had those 2 avenues that I really enjoyed and everything else. So, again, I very, very much appreciate it and look for the insight. You've had a remarkable career in broadcasting across multiple different sports. What initially drew you into kind of that career path?
Well, you were just talking about some of your heroes, growing up, and the same is true with me. Like, I'd be out raking leaves on a fall afternoon and listening to Saturday afternoon college football broadcast. And some of my early heroes were the broadcasters for the Kansas City Chiefs or Kansas City A's or Kansas City Royals, Fred White, Denny Matthews. And then as I take that AM dial up and down, I'd listen to the Detroit Tigers and Ernie Harwell, or Jack Buck and the St. Louis Cardinals. Or I even had friends send me tapes of the brilliant Vin Scully, who I later became friends with when I did the Angels and he did the Dodgers. And he was a remarkable guy, and in my opinion, the greatest baseball broadcaster of all time. Bill King in the NBA, Dick Enberg. These were my heroes growing up. And of course, as a mediocre athlete, I had heroes who were athletes as well, whether it was George Brett with the Royals or Tiny Archibald with the Kansas City Omaha Kings. But I had a passion for sports, but I also had a passion for storytelling, and that's what led me in that direction. And it took a little, learning how to do it and figuring out what my passion would be, and that's why I really have to thank Kansas State University for having a broadcasting class. It wasn't really necessarily a broadcast school, but they had a program, and I had an outstanding professor and a guy named Bob Fiddler, and he helped inspire my passion for sports.
So do you remember what your very first broadcast was like and what it was and how that kind of shaped you?
I do, because it was very interesting. My first semester, I was in academic probation, and I really felt that I wasn't college and I didn't link up because I was not a good test taker. And I also didn't know what I wanted to do. So I actually took a year off. I worked as a busboy in Kansas City and had worked for my dad as well. So I had 2-3 jobs so I could figure out what I wanted to do and then go back to school. And when I went back to school, that was the realization that, Steve, you're not that good of an athlete, but you like talking about it. So what if you took a broadcast class? And as I said, this great professor challenged us, but he said, we need to make money for the college radio station. So whoever sells the most time in Manhattan, Kansas, will get the first opportunity. Well, Andrew, all I can tell you is that I blew the competition away. I raised like $380, and the next closest to me raised like 75. And I'd go down to banks and coffee shops and restaurants and just ask for $5, $10 to be a sponsor and have their name mentioned on a college broadcast or a high school broadcast. But to get back to what you asked me, do you remember your first broadcast? All I can tell you is I decided, because I sold the most time, got the choice, but I thought, you're probably not that good. You shouldn't be doing the junior varsity games. And back in my day, freshmen were not eligible, so they had junior varsity basketball games and junior varsity football games. And I felt I'm not ready for that. But we also broadcast the local Catholic high school, and it was 1A, like 100 students and probably 50 boys, and 30 of them went out for the football team. But Andrew, I did a Lucky High, was the name of the school, against Wakefield. And all I can tell you is I walked out of the booth and my hands were shaking. And they were shaking not because it was a great game, but it was because I discovered what it was that I would do for the rest of my life. I absolutely fell in love with play-by-play and everything about it. And as I said, this professor, Bob Fiddler, gave me opportunity after opportunity. And great teachers are, to me, those individuals who discover or who can ignite the passion in their students. And then when they see that passion, they throw kindling on it. They put, leaves on it and get that fire burning. And he did that with me, where every single time a job came up, whether it was shooting film for the Kansas State football or basketball games, I got that job. Then there was my first professional experience was making $5 a game to broadcast the St. Xavier Rams football and basketball games for KJCK in Junction City, Kansas. But once again, I was building my resume. And when I graduated from Kansas State, I wanted to start small. I knew I did not have the talent or skill of Bob Costas, who could go immediately from Syracuse to KMOX in St. Louis and then on to CBS. I knew that I needed to really practice my work and really work with my craft. So I started out very small at a radio station in Hastings, Nebraska, 5,000 watts, but they did everything. I was their sports director. I made $6,000 a year. I did American Legion baseball, college football, and high school football. There were 3 high schools in town, a college in town, Hastings College. And by the time the way I looked at it, graduated from KHAS, I had spent 2 years there, but I had over 200 play-by-play experiences. And that led me to my mid-market job in Topeka, Kansas, which led me to a greater market in Cincinnati. And that's where I got my first professional experience broadcasting the Cincinnati Reds, Cincinnati Bengals, University of Cincinnati there. And from there, I went to San Francisco, and that's where I did the Giants. And I was a sportscaster as well. I did college football and basketball for Fresno State and eventually the Golden State Warriors, and then on to ESPN, which led me to Fox Sports and doing Major League Baseball, NFL, college football, college basketball, and the NBA, and just had a blast.
You've called games for, like you mentioned, baseball, football, college sports, basketball. Did your preparation change any for the different sports, and if so, how?
No, I'm a person who believes that luck is the residue of preparation. So I was always extremely prepared, and maybe it's because of my self-esteem, not believing that I was as gifted as a Dick Enberg or a Bob Costas. So I figured I had to work even harder than they did for my broadcasts. And the beauty of it was that I just loved the sports. I loved the ability to tell a good story, and that's what drove me. But in our business, there will always be excitement when you get the new job. As an example, when I got the job with the Angels and then Pac-10 football and basketball. But then there's the disappointment after 15 years with the Angels being let go, and then it always led to a greater opportunity. And for me, the 2 times I've been let go, I've always come up with a better job after that. And the greatest example was growing up in Kansas City. I was a huge Kansas City Royals fan. George Brett was one of my heroes. Dennis Leonard, Paul Splittorff, Steve Busby, Frank White, Willie Wilson. Those were my heroes growing up. And then to end my career going back home to broadcast the team I love and to be part of their winning a championship in 2015 was absolutely awesome. As a matter of fact, I still wear a little Royals shirt that you can see now. But it was a real blessing. And then the last 2 years of my career, I have a great marriage. I've been married 40 years to my wife, Stacy. And the last 2 years I was going, you know what? I loved what I did for 50 years, 47 years, but I'm missing her more and more. Do I want more time with this woman or less? And that's why after the 2022 season, I said at the age of 68, I'm done. I want a little more time with my wife and our kids and our granddaughters. Now we have 3 granddaughters. And I know you're a soccer fan, and my oldest granddaughter, Taylor, is an excellent soccer player in West Michigan.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I mean, I've always wondered with the traveling and everything else like that go along with, working in the sports field, how much time you really get to kind of be with your family. And I would assume in the heart of it, you're constantly moving around, constantly being part of the team. It must be a difficult thing for all those years.
It is, but that's why it takes an amazing partner. And I remember Sparky Anderson I worked with. He asked me one time, he said, Steve, what do you think is the key to being a great ball player? And I said, being on time. And he goes, no. I said, giving 100%. No. Working on your craft. No. He put all those aside. And I said, Sparky, I don't understand. What is the key to being a great baseball player? And he goes, choosing the right wife. And I go, what? And he goes, Fizz, I have seen young men with incredible talent marry the wrong women, and they go on the road and they worry all the time, where is she? And then I've seen guys who had average, limited ability, they marry the right woman and they empower them to be the best they can be. And with my wife, she was always very supportive of me. She knew that I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer. As a matter of fact, I'll give you an example. When I left Cincinnati, I was the sportscaster, and our news anchor was Jerry Springer. And we went from dead last in the ratings to number 1. And when we became number 1, the boss called me and said, I don't want you going off and doing these ball games anymore with the Bengals, the University of Cincinnati, the preseason games with the Bengals, and of course doing the Reds games with Marty Brennaman and Joe Nuxall. And I was devastated because I really didn't want to be a sportscaster. I wanted to be a play-by-play broadcaster. So my wife and I had been recently married, and we adopted our first daughter. And so I'm feeling like I'm responsible. I'm not only a broadcaster, but I'm a father and a husband now. And I went home and I told my wife the situation that I have an opportunity, a 6-figure opportunity to be a sportscaster for WLWT in Cincinnati. That's the offer, but I can't do play-by-play. And at the same time, the guy who hired me to do the Reds games was now the director of broadcasting with the Golden State Warriors and had shown my videotape to the station manager of KTVU in Oakland, California. And the guy saw me and liked me, and he said, hey, you know what? If this kid comes out here, I'll give him work 1 day a week at $175 a day. So, Andrew, you can do the math. It's a job of 6 figures as a full-time job as a sportscaster, or taking a job 1 day a week at KTVU in a very expensive marketplace. But the beauty of my wife, she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do play-by-play. And she said, well, then that's what we have to do, because I don't want to live with an unhappy man. And she knew I'd be unhappy. And the miracles that happened after that were amazing. To me, it was kind of a let go, let God moment. We drove out there. Funny story, my little brother calls me up. He's a produce salesman. He said, hey, Steve, I've got a truckload of lettuce I'm dropping off in New York City, so I'll have an empty truck. I can drive by. I can have them pick it up for no money at all, pick up your furniture, because I need the truck in San Francisco. They moved it out there, and my wife and I and 6-month-old daughter went out there, and I didn't just sit around. I hustled. Mm-hmm. I called a friend at KGO Radio. He wanted vacation relief, and then I found more work. And then the general manager of the TV station saw that I was coming in on days where I wasn't getting paid and working. Well, Andrew, within 3 months, he calls me in, the boss of KTVU, and he says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you on the air with the San Francisco Giants. I'm going to have you join their television team. This is in the middle of August. That doesn't happen. Right. Well, the team that year wins the National League West, and I have the call. So that led me to, they let go the guy who was the lead voice for the San Francisco Giants. I became one of the voices working with Dwayne Kuiper and Joe Morgan on the television side. And then I also got a job, which was remarkable in how it happened, with Fresno State doing their football and basketball package. So within 4 months of leaving Cincinnati, I was making double the money, and I was the sports director at KTVU. I was doing college football, college basketball. I was doing Major League Baseball, and it was remarkable how it all happened. I call it miraculous. And but sometimes that's what you do. I mean, luck is the residue of preparation. I was prepared for the moment. I did hustle. I got the job. And then a couple of years later, the same situation happened where the boss said, hey, I'm watching our sportscast on Friday and you're there. And then on Saturday, I'm seeing you do a college basketball game in Long Beach, California. Mm-hmm. What is it that you want to do? And at that time, both ESPN and the Golden State Warriors were coming after me to do play-by-play on radio for the Golden State Warriors, and ESPN to do college sports and what would become their first year of Major League Baseball. And he let me out of my contract, and I did the Warriors for 3 years. I was with ESPN for 7 years, and that led me to the job with Fox for, I believe, 25 years from 1996 really through 2022.
Mm-hmm. So now, is there any particular moment or game in your career that stands out, especially meaningful or emotional or anything else like that?
There are so many that are meaningful and emotional, but to be around championships is phenomenal. And I was around 3 teams that won national championships in college sports, where I did the Pac-10 when Arizona won in 1997, UCLA won in 1995, and USC in college football under Pete Carroll won back-to-back national championships. But probably the most dramatic when you're with a team and you travel with the players, you travel with the coaches, your friendships are really unique. The 2 championships I was involved in Major League Baseball, the Angels in 2002, and my Royals, the team I loved growing up, when they won in 2015. But in 2014, I remember we were in Chicago when the team clinched, and I knew, my gosh, it had been 29 years of sadness and misfortune and struggles for this Royals team, and to see them clinch a spot in postseason was remarkable. And then, as we all know, they just ripped through the playoffs, won every single game until they got to the World Series, but lost only in 7 games to the San Francisco Giants. And then the following year in 2015, they won it all. So that was very rewarding, very satisfying, and also very humbling to be with the team I absolutely loved growing up and to be part of their championship.
Now, you've worked with quite a few color commentators. I believe you had mentioned over 150 different color commentators, including a ton of Hall of Famers, Johnny Bench, Pete Rose. How do you build chemistry with all the different people that you end up working with? How does that work out?
I always looked at it like there's a reason this gentleman or lady is sitting next to me. They're the expert. All I can do is basically be a point guard, give them the ball, let them be the stars. And as an example, when I worked with Sparky Anderson, my first 3 years with the Angels, he did the home games. Jerry Royce broadcast with me the road games, and Jerry was as good as it gets in breaking down pitching. And Sparky was remarkable at understanding team management, he hated the word communicate. He loved the word understand. And I think that's what made him such a great manager. He understood how to get the most out of individuals, whether it was Kirk Gibson or Lou Whitaker or Pete Rose or Johnny Bench, but all of them loved them so much. So I basically said, they're the star. Let me put them on, give them the opportunity to shine. It's my responsibility to describe the action. It's their responsibility to basically say why it was successful or failed. And so that's what I tried to do. But I was really blessed with some fantastic color commentators. Marcus Johnson, who was my longest tenured basketball broadcaster for 12 years, doing the Pac-10/12 conference. Tom Ramsey, I was with him for a decade, and he was remarkable, former quarterback at UCLA and later the New England Patriots, among other teams. But he was as good as it gets at understanding time management. And I don't know how many times I would just get out of his way, and he would talk about what a team needed to do with 8 minutes left in the game, with 6 minutes left in the game, how they needed to manage that clock, whether it was a running play, a passing play, a play action. I don't know how many times Tom would call the play, and they would deliver. And then, of course, in baseball, I worked, 35 years. You do 162 games a year. But my longest tenured broadcaster was with Rex Hudler. And I don't think anybody had a passion for the game or sports, and particularly baseball, like Rex Hudler. And I called him a slash. He was both a broadcaster who had to explain what happened, but he was also an entertainer. And he was a lot of fun to work with and one of my best friends to this day.
So, as we mentioned earlier, you're also a published author. Your first book, you had a dream about, if I'm not mistaken, and that's what kind of put you on the path to being a writer. What was the dream about, and how did that all work out?
I've always had a book with me on the road, and it wasn't necessarily a sports book. We always had media guides, of course. But in my case, I would bring a classic. I'd love to read John Steinbeck, East of Eden, or Diana Gabaldon, The Outlander, who I think is an absolutely brilliant writer, and she's become kind of a mentor of mine. Ernest Hemingway. I would always have a classic with me because I liked great storytelling. Tom Clancy, Vince Flynn, terrific storytellers. Well, because I was such an avid reader, I constantly was asking myself, you love telling stories in sports. Could you ever write? Well, I took my wife on vacation to Italy in 2006, and this may sound strange, but it did happen. We were staying at a bed and breakfast in southern Tuscany. It was just a farmstead, and I had a vivid dream of a great walled city, two families struggling to produce a great wine, and a young lady coming from town who worked in the market, and she was helping them out. And when I woke up, instead of going back to bed, I went to the bathroom, wrote down the outline, and then went back to bed. And the next day I told my wife the story, and she said, that's pretty cool. I mean, very interesting. And then we went on and toured Italy, Florence, Venice, Bologna. And a week later, after this dream, we're going to meet three other couples in this town of Lucca, Italy. I've never been to Lucca. I just finished my baseball season, so we didn't have any time to study about where we were going. I had never seen a picture. Well, as we're driving towards Lucca, I see the walls and I go, oh my gosh, Stacy, these are the walls. These are the walls. And if you drive around to the left, there'll be a portal. We can enter there, park the car, and only a couple of blocks away will be the market where my young lady who became the protagonist in my story, that's where she worked. And I think only a couple of blocks from the market is this church. Well, it all came true. We drove around to the left, there was an entryway. Then there was a parking area. 2-block walk, there was the market. A couple of blocks from the market was the church, and it was the Church of San Frediano. So obviously my interest was piqued. I went and bought a book of the history of Lucca. I started doing research. I started researching wine and came up with this story of two families trying to produce a great wine in Italy's dark days of World War I, the rise of fascism, and later World War II. It became two books. The first, The Walls of Lucca, from 1914 to 1930, and then Above the Walls, the sequel, picked up the action in the family's plight in 1938 after Mussolini writes his Manifesto of Race, solidifying his union with Adolf Hitler, and how it affected not only this family, but the citizens of Italy, which would later lead to World War II. And interestingly, both books won Reader's Favorite and Reader Views Best Historical Fiction for 2018 and 2019. And then that led me to my kind of baseball, family saga, political intrigue, action adventure story, which was Walks with the Wind, which won the Writer's Digest Grand Prize in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, I looked online for all these books and everything else like that. I've actually purchased the first one that you wrote, so I can give that a read. I have
Thank you.
A whole bunch of books here that I want to read. I'm going to move that one right to the front. But you mentioned you like being a storyteller, and what role does storytelling, whether it was on air or in your writing, how does that connect you with people? How does that, what's the word I'm looking for? How does that, resonate with people? That's kind of what I was saying.
I think one of the things that led me to broadcasting team sports was first playing in it, but then also seeing the success. And when I saw young people leave their egos in the locker room, play for the individual, the athlete right next to him, it's remarkable the success that would happen just naturally. And I saw that in the championships with UCLA, with Arizona in basketball, with USC in football, and of course with the Angels under Mike Scioscia in baseball, and the Royals under Ned Yost with the championship. There's a beauty in that. And I actually wanted to carry that over with my stories. And once again, The Walls of Lucca is about two families struggling to produce a great wine, but each of them are individuals with talent, but they have some form of unforgiveness that they're holding on to. As a matter of fact, Giovanni, who's the wine owner, he's been emotionally abused by his father, and he has some unforgiveness that he's holding on to. Susanna, who's his wife, she represents the ego, wanting more, whether it's fame, fortune, being part of the new fascist government. Angelina, who is the wine maker's wife, her husband is killed in World War I, and she has this terrible grief and suffering and unforgiveness that she's holding on to. Each individual, and of course Franco, who's my male protagonist in the book, goes into the war and tragically sees some horror. They call it PTSD. They called it shell shock back then. But each individual is holding on to some form of unforgiveness, part of the ego. And that's where my female protagonist, Isabella Rosselli, comes in. And she very slowly, here's The Walls of Lucca, chips away at the walls, the barriers that are keeping them from becoming the people and the team that they want to be. And they want to just simply produce a great wine. But the only way they can do that is to let go of their ego. And that's why I compare it to team sports. And one of the things I love about team sports is you will never have success trying to do it alone. But when you let go of your personal ego and play for the team, it's amazing how individual success naturally flows your way. And I saw it so many times in the championships. I mean, when you talk about team success, I'll give you an example. With that 2014-2015 Royals, the leaders on the team were Salvador Perez and Eric Hosmer. Alone, I don't think they were great players. Together, they were great. Together, they were winning players. Together, they bonded everyone. And it was amazing how much those individuals cared for each other. Lorenzo Cain loved Mike Moustakas. Eric Hosmer loved Alcides Escobar. Alcides Escobar loved Salvador Perez. It was just a tremendous unity on the team, but a lot of it had to do with letting go of your ego. And I tried to do the same thing with my characters in all of my books. They're holding on to something. They have to let it go to become the person or the unit that they want to be?
Hold on, I had your question right here. What inspired you to write Walks with the Wind, the story of the Native American boy's quest to make it to the major leagues? What made you come up with that idea?
I've always been fascinated with baseball, when particularly individuals whose success is heightened when they're alone. And with team sports, I don't think there's any more dramatic example than a pitcher. He's on the mound. He's alone. Guys are on base. They're taking leads. People are screaming at him from the dugout, screaming at him from the stands. But the great ones that I've watched, particularly who is the role model for my protagonist, Sam Cloud Carson, when I only broadcast 2 Greg Maddux games, but I was on the edge of my seat, Andrew. His ability to wipe out the white noise and focus and throw the ball with not a tremendous amount of velocity. He was actually had below velocity than the major league average. But you see his career, and it's remarkable. His ability, well, he was brilliant, number one, but to throw the ball exactly where he wants to, with movement, changing speeds, a fastball that may have averaged 91 miles an hour in an era where they wanted nothing but 95 miles an hour. But to watch him was fantastic. And then to broadcast people like his teammate, John Smoltz, or the great pitchers we had with the Kansas City Royals, particularly in the bullpen, Greg Holland, Wade Davis, Kelvin Herrera, Luke Hochevar, and to communicate with them. So I took that individual and go, this is a guy who has incredible success and the ability to wipe out the white noise and focus only on the catcher's glove. The other profession is a wildlife tracker. A wildlife tracker needs to be alone for their success because they're basically trusting their intuition. Sights, sounds, smells, yes, when a tracker is reading but they also have the ability to open their awareness, Mother, and read nature and trust their intuition. So my story is a young man, Sam Cloud Carson, who's a great athlete, and he has most of his success as a pitcher, but he's also an excellent high school basketball player. But he's also a brilliant wildlife tracker, a savant, and his family owns an outfitting company in Southwest Colorado. The antagonist is a gentleman who owns a private military contracting company and does security work in Afghanistan. And I'm not sure if you knew this, but when we went from a military operation to a counterinsurgency operation, we had more private military contractors in Afghanistan than we did military personnel. I had to do a lot of research about this because obviously I'm a baseball guy writing about political intrigue and action adventure. Well, he comes across this family because he is a hunter and he hires guides to take him on these trips in Africa and Asia and also in the United States. And he has gone to Colorado and hired these guys that he's heard about, and they're off the charts. It's the boy and his father, and Sam is the boy at the time. And he comes up with this idea, what if I used human trackers just for security work in Afghanistan to spot trouble, report back to the special forces, and then take out the problem. And so he's going low money, high return, and he blackmails. I don't want to give away the story, but that's the story that won the Writer's Digest Grand Prize, and I was rather surprised at that. And when they interviewed me for their magazine, I asked them, I said, I don't understand because I don't consider myself that outstanding a writer. And he goes, Steve, your story was so original. A baseball player, a wildlife tracker, political intrigue, but more importantly, a young man's vision quest story, because obviously he is a brilliant tracker and a brilliant baseball player, but he's missing one element, and that is his spiritual growth. And what I wanted to do, and I think I pulled off successfully, because I was doing it about a Native American young man who's from the Southern Ute tribe. And I wanted to make sure I was both accurate and respectful of the Ute culture. And I worked with their Sundance chief and their education coordinator of their cultural center, because I wanted to make sure this wasn't a white man writing about a Native American story. This was simply an author writing about a young man's vision quest. And they liked the book so much that they're now selling it in their gift shop at the cultural center in Ignacio, Colorado. So that was a good pat on the back, but the most was from Writer's Digest, which is a very esteemed magazine, when they selected me their winner of the grand prize in 2021.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot had to go into that to make sure that you were accurate for a whole bunch of different topics in that, and that's great, because when I'm the same way. When I look at something or research something, I dive into like everything, and it sounds great. Again, I'm gonna hopefully get your book soon, and then continue on the path of all of those.
Yeah, you being a sports fan, I would think that you would go after Walks with the Wind. The Walls of Luca is dear to my heart, but it is a historical fiction of a difficult time, World War I and the rise of fascists, and World War II. But Walks with the Wind, and then the sequel, Catching the Wind. Catching is more the baseball story. Yeah. Walks with the Wind is a very tragic story of this young man's loss.
Oh, I'm a history buff too, so I knew Walls of Luca would be right up my alley. So, kind of going back to broadcasting a little bit, what has changed in the world of broadcasting since you started, and then do you see it going anywhere in the future that you have some ideas with?
Analytics. I mean, it has pretty much taken over the business. But to me, whenever I was part of a championship team, there were always individuals that you'd go, gosh, if analytics looked at this guy, there's no way he'd make it to the major leagues. David Eckstein is a classic example. David Eckstein did not have much power. He had average, maybe above average speed, below average arm. His range wasn't that good, but he was never the smartest guy on the field. Analytics would have killed him. He would not have made it out of a tryout camp. But David Eckstein was a world champion with the Anaheim Angels, and he was a world champion with the St. Louis Cardinals. With the Royals, they had some players where you go, gosh, they didn't have the best starting rotation, but they had a starting rotation that was absolutely selfless and understood their role. And the Royals' role was those starters knew that they had the best bullpen in baseball. And the starters, most starters want to go as far as they can, but when you let go of your ego, you're playing for the team. And the starters we had on that team, Edinson Volquez and Jeremy Guthrie and other guys, when I talked to them, they said, all I have to do is get a tie game or a one-run lead to the sixth inning, and we're going to win. Because their bullpen with Hochevar and Herrera and Davis and Holland, it was ridiculous. And the same thing was true with the World Championship team I did with the Angels. The Angels had an above average starting rotation, but they had a ridiculous bullpen in Troy Percival and Frankie Rodriguez and Ben Weber and Scott Shields. And the same situation. If those starters could just get the ball to the sixth inning, the game was over. And that's what inspired me when you saw young people go, I don't care who gets the win as long as we win. And then you see this ridiculous success. And here's a stat. I talked about analytics I don't like. The Kansas City Royals finished dead last in home runs and dead last in walks in that 2-year period, 2014 and 2015. And they won a world championship? How do you do that? To me, yes, they had talent, but they also had this unity, this togetherness that was incredible. And that's what I'm so proud of, was just as a storyteller to watch that unity in action. And the same thing was true with Mike Scioscia's Angels in 2022. That was not a great home run team, but they were the best base running team. They were the best bullpen. And they also had the speed, but quite frankly, it was a unity. It was a love of these athletes for each other.
Now, one question about today's game in baseball is: is it the new norm that starters won't get very many complete games? Like it's going to be 5-6 innings, and then you're turning it over to a bullpen.
Yes, and I don't like that because back in my day, when I would go to a Royals game, I'd look at the schedule and go, "Oh man, Nolan Ryan and Dennis Leonard are going to go head to head, and those are guys who go 9 innings." I wanted to see that great matchup, and the only way I think you get it back because we've fallen in love with velocity, and as Greg Maddux said so many times, location, movement, then velocity. But now we have these guys trying to throw as hard as they can for as long as they can. And the guys that I really admire are the ones that still know how to pitch and can go deep into games. For the Royals, Seth Lugo doesn't throw that hard, but he's got a good changeup and he's got a good curveball, so he's fun to watch. But the only way you're going to get rid of that is to force teams to go, let's say, with a 10-man pitching staff. That's all you can have. Now you have 13, so you can just beat up this bullpen. And but if you only have a 10-man pitching staff, and maybe like hockey where you say, okay, this guy's not eligible and this guy's not eligible, that way you can use your 8 a little bit. Let's say yesterday's starter isn't going and a guy who went 3 innings the bullpen, they're not going, so these guys are. But that's the only way you're going to get the game to go back to where you demand more from your starting pitchers. And the Royals are saving their bullpen because Michael Wacha is going 7. Seth Lugo is going 7. If a starting pitcher can go 7, it is remarkable how much success that bullpen will have. But the teams that struggle are the ones that don't have much of a rotation, that go 3, 4. They might strike out 9 guys in 4 innings, but they've thrown 100 pitches by 4+ innings. So I don't like that part of the game. I do like some of the rule changes. I like the rule change where you have to throw the baseball in a certain time frame rather than stand in the mound. And that's cut the game back dramatically and making it much better. And I've talked to every single broadcaster because their games have gone from 305 average to 236 average. Mm-hmm. And so you're moving. And Major League Baseball's competition, obviously, is the NFL and NBA and NHL. And they're flying along because it's a much more exciting sport, although I still prefer baseball because it's 3 hours of conversation and 5 minutes of action. But when the action happens, it's pretty cool.
So one final question I have for you today, and again, I thank you very much for your time, is if you could go back and talk to a young Steven Physioc when you were just starting out, what would you tell him?
Way to go. I'd say way to go, because there was a time you tried to quit college and you didn't. You listened to your mom. You went back to school when you had an opportunity to go to. When you had an opportunity to stay in a marketplace and be the sports director, you didn't go in that direction. You chose your passion. And I think if young people can choose their passion and work at it, it's amazing how naturally success or money, whatever it is that you're playing for, flows your way. And I was never a person who wanted to have the biggest contract or make $1 more than someone else. I just loved what I did. And I knew that if I did it well, my life would be taken care of. And here, my wife and I are now 70 years old. I look back and I go, good job. You did a good job. I have no regrets. I mean, I really love what I did. I wasn't the best, but I wasn't the worst. And it was, I have nothing but great memories, even from the times when I was fired from the Angels or fired from, let go by the Cincinnati WLWT. I always found something better, and I feel very, very blessed.
Fantastic. So again, award-winning author, award-winning play-by-play broadcaster, and I have goosebumps just hearing some of the stories and stuff like that, being a big history person and sports fan. So again, I thank you very much for your time, and I cannot thank you enough for being here.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much. And if fans want to find my books, they can go to Amazon or they can go to stevephysioc.com. My last name is a weird one. It's spelled Physioc.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I'll put that in there one more time. And again, thank you very much for your time. And hopefully, right around playoff time, we can reconnect and we can kind of go over what you like about the World Series playoffs.
Absolutely. I'm always interested. Right now, I'm focusing on the NBA playoffs. And
right.
Indiana and Oklahoma City, two of the teams I wanted to see there. I've become a Nuggets fan living in Evergreen, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm excited for those two organizations to have a chance at a championship.
Yeah, definitely a fun series for that. I'm just outside of Boston, so season didn't go quite as well as we thought it would, but it'll be interesting.
Yes, but you've had your share of championships.
I have.
And my dad being from Boston, I was a Celtics fan too. I was a big Havlicek, Bailey Howell, Dave Cowens, Bill Russell, Casey Jones. I worked with Casey a little bit with the Golden State Warriors, and dear friend of Bill Walton before he passed, and obviously Larry Bird. I broadcast the Warriors in the Bird era, so that was pretty remarkable too. But you guys have had your share of championships.
Yeah, I can't complain. I can't. But again, thank you very much.
Of course, the coach of Golden State at the time was the great Don Nelson, Boston Celtic. And he was one of the finest basketball coaches that was ever around.
Yep. So again, thank you very much for your time, and it has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it.
All right, have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by the Massachusetts Pirates of the Indoor Football League. Looking for a family-friendly night out that's anything but boring? Experience the high-octane action of indoor football, where every seat makes you part of the game. With tickets starting as low as $18, even front row seats are affordable. Be a part of the excitement. If a game ball lands your way, you get to keep it. How cool is that? And then after the final whistle, stick around for an autograph session with the players for just $15. Don't miss out. This is football like you've never experienced before. Come see the game in the Songus Arena in Lowell, Massachusetts. And for ticket information, go to www.masspiratesfootball.com. Again, that's masspiratesfootball.com. I think this was one of the better shows that I've been able to be a part of with Steven Physioc on here and giving a ton of insight of what it's like to work in the sports industry from up in the booth. Some breaking news that I brought with you and everything else like that. The next few episodes are going to be involving the previews of the NHL and the NBA finals. We'll have some guests on for that. And then we'll start working on another Marina episode. I know how everybody seems to have responded to those episodes really well. She'll be back and recording with me on Friday. We'll talk to some more New Hampshire Destroyer players, and we'll be able to kind of take a look at that local scene and how everything went with those local teams. As always, you visit us at www.loftsidebanter.com. That's loftsideBantr.com. Loftsidebanter@gmail.com. I'm looking for people to start reaching out and give me some more topics. And then some other things you'll be able to see this week will be some live show put together and be able to interact with some people on live stream. There will be some gaming on that as well coming up. And just as always, Loftside Bantr is a intellectual product of Loftside Creative Media, the new LLC. And I can't tell you how excited I am to keep working on this and get some more great guests like today. Today really energized me and what we kind of do here at Loftside. Great interview today. Like I mentioned, gave you some breaking news. We'll have a lot more coming up this week and early next week. So thank you, everybody, no matter where you are, whether it's morning, noon, or night. I want to thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you on the next show.